Hello, everyone, and welcome to IPL Radio. We have an amazing interview today with the amazing Brian Hinzlewood. Did I say it correctly, Brian?
Hinzlewood, yeah.
Hinzlewood, fabulous.
Yes. Excellent.
And you have had an amazing career that we want to I'm sure everyone knows you, but to get this exclusive interview with you is just truly special. And thank you for joining us. So I'm just going to read out a little bit of a blurb here so that everyone who doesn't know you can get to know you. So Brian played a mysterious character called Clive in The Young Doctors, who landed a job as a barman at Bunny's Place, where Clive was really a criminal who was working with the violent Frank Curtis, who was stuck in prison. And it goes on to say that Clive ended up torturing bunnies and causing considerable damage. I know that fans would love to hear more about these dramatic scenes in which Bunny's Place went up in flames. Can you tell us about whenever you were at the Young Doctors and playing this character?
Look, obviously it's a long time ago, and I've been trying as hard as I can to resurrect anything that would kind of stand out, that would be of interest to your listeners, to your viewers. And apart from setting fire to things, which at the time I was getting a bit of a reputation for it, because I'd also burnt down Johnny's restaurant in number 96 as my character. So it was interesting that I got this, because it was years after number 96, obviously. So it was good. It was, look, it wasn't a major role. It was a relatively small role in a show that was doing really, really well. And as most actors would do, I was happy to take it. I mean, at the time I was working, fairly regularly. I didn't have an awful lot of downtime, which most actors do. So flitting from show to show was quite good. It not only did you get to meet, I was going to say thousands, but lots of other actors, but you got to find out what was going on. I mean, from an actor's point of view, the best way to get work is to be working. Because then, excuse me, other actors say, "Oh, did you hear what they're doing down such and such and such?" "Oh, no, I didn't." So get onto your agents and say, "Get me into that." So that's how I got into Young Doctors. I was doing a show, and somebody said, "Oh, look, this is what they're looking for. Give them a call." So my agent called them. I got the role, and it was a lot of fun. I mean, the people were very nice. The rest of the cast, the regular cast, were very supportive, very good. It's kind of, to some degree, it's kind of what happens after the event that's more important. When ages and ages later, I was living in Sydney at the time, and I was walking down the street, and literally two elderly ladies started attacking me, physically attacking me. And I thought, I don't know what I've done. I was kind of completely thrown. And they were only slapping, they weren't like punching and kicking or anything. And then they started abusing me for burning down the restaurant. And what? It's a show, it's pretend, it's all make-believe. So, yeah.
Not to them, it wasn't, Brian. It wasn't to them. It was real to them.
Yes, yeah. It's terrifying how people. I don't know that they do so much now. Maybe they do, but that sort of thing has happened to me a couple of times, where people have. I did a show where I played a bank robber, and at the same time, I was, as lots of actors were doing then, I was driving cabs. And I'd gone back to the cab depot one night after having worked, from whatever it was, 4 in the afternoon till 4 in the morning or something. And the guy was filling up the cab, and he said, "How much did you get?" And I thought he was talking about the cab. I thought he was sort of saying, "Did you make $50 or $150? And I said, "What?" And he said, "How much did you get?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, And I'd filmed this months before. He said, the bank robbery. I said, what are you talking about? And he said, the bank. I said, did you see the whole show? Because it was just like a 45, 47-minute show. He said, yeah. I said, what happens in the end? He said, you get shot. I said, yeah, I get shot and I get killed. And here I am. It's make-believe. I never robbed the bank. Oh. So these sorts of things happen all the time. It's quite bizarre.
It
I
is.
hate to
I can
think of
imagine.
some of the people that have been in, some of the other shows for years and years and years. They must absolutely lose their own personality. So,
how long were you in the show, Brian?
In Young Doctors?
Yes.
I think from memory it was about 6 weeks.
Yes. Very good.
And when you say 6 weeks, you're not always working every day. So, you could do a couple of hours one day and then have a couple of days off. But they lock you in for a set period. And I think from memory, I can't remember exactly, but I think it was about 6 weeks.
Yeah. We've interviewed the full cast before, and it just seems like it was such a family. The cast members were very close, and everyone supported each other, and especially anybody coming in. But for those people who are aspiring actors, or who like you went from show to show, like that's a real amazing thing for an actor, isn't it? So is your special tip is to keep yourself in the game, keep connected?
Yeah, look, I used to think that having a regular part in a soap opera, any soap opera, was kind of, would stop you doing lots of other things. And to a degree it does. But then, if you're in something for a year, 2 years, 5 years, some of these people, 20 years, then, it's a very good way to earn a living. I did, thank you very much, I did very well in earning a living. But there were times when you think, oh, I'd just like to be, I think the problem is it will become a little bit like a 9-to-5 job, even though they are not the hours you generally work. But so, there is downsides to it. But and the other thing is not being a regular cast member. You did get the chance of going all over the place. I mean, different shows, different.
But how adventurous it is, to get to know a character, to get to be, to live through that and to be someone else for a difference. How did you manage that? How did you manage that switch from being Brian to being this character?
Yeah, I've always been fairly good at accents. Which helps a lot. Not that they particularly want an accent, but it does help you to get into a different kind of frame of mind. The easiest way for me to do it is obviously to read the character, to read the script and the whole thing, and then try and pick out one thing that reminds me of somebody, like a friend or a relative or whatever. So I then base my character on the person I'm thinking about, not necessarily on the way the character's been written. I mean, obviously I'm basing it on the way the character's been written, but I need to have a link to something to get the character to work. So that's how I do it. It's and I always found it relatively easy. And once you get into the character, it's easy. I mean, it's much easier in theatre because you start at the beginning and you finish at the end. Whereas television, you might film the last scene that you're doing first.
Yes.
It's all over the place. And they do try to keep it in some sort of chronological order, but it doesn't always work. So, if you happen to be doing outside shots, then, they're relying on the weather and, the jet plane's not going over and the truck not breaking down, blah, 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 blah. When it's in the studio, it's a lot easier. So, yeah, so in terms of characters, I just, as I say, used to try and find a little thing that reminded me of, I once kind of latched onto my father for it. And he had some very unusual little things he did. And so I'd use him, or, you know, the next door neighbor, or whoever it was. Yeah. So that for me, that's how I do it. Other actors have, you know, lots of different ways.
And for me personally, who doesn't have a big capacity for memory, how do you memorize lines? You know, how do you do that?
I think that's probably the one question that every actor gets asked more than any other. It's just, look, I don't want to say it's simple. It's not simple, obviously. When you're doing film and television, it's easier because they're doing shots or scenes. When you're doing theatre, you've got to remember your whole script. And if you're in the play for the entirety, then, you know, it's a lot of lines to learn. It really just gets down to practice. If you take the script home, I mean, sometime years ago, I don't know that they do. I mean, they always have rehearsal time. Even, you know, television shows have rehearsal time. It's not necessarily a long time. They used to have, so it was much longer. Now, because of costs and things like that, they've cut it right down. But so it's really just, it's like saying to people, how can you possibly be, I don't know, a doctor? You know, things that doctors have to remember is extraordinary, but they do it because they're doing it all the time. So it just becomes second nature. It's like any other job, really. It's better than a job.
Think,
but
yeah,
it's,
one of the keys to it, I think, is not overthinking it, because if you overthink it, you become overwhelmed and then you have no capacity to remember it.
Yeah, well, as I say, I mean, I started off acting while I was really quite young, and it's just something you kind of grow into. It's not something you think, oh my God, I'm in this show for 6 weeks or 6 months or whatever it might be. I've got to learn all these lines. I haven't. I've got to remember what we're doing the next day when it comes to filming. So you're only ever remembering bits of it. I've worked with some really well-known actors, including well-known American actors, who you think, how did you get to be well-known? You can't remember your lines at all. But, you know, they were good-looking and paid the bills. So it's, yeah. So yeah, learning lines is just habit forming, really. It's as simple as that.
It is. Brian, it's been an absolute pleasure to chat with you today. Thank you so much for joining us. I
You're
really
very welcome. Thank
know
you.
you more.
Yeah, good luck with it all. Thanks very much
Thank
indeed.
you so much, Brian. You take care.
Okay, bye-bye now.